Hi guys, thanks for coming. Let me just get my pens ready. So, as Steve has already kindly said, I'm Angie McQuillan. Just going to write my name here. As you can see, I've got fantastic handwriting. So today I've been invited in to talk a bit around confidence and resilience, because I know that it's something that really impacts on how we perform at work and stepping forward and going out of our comfort zone and not, holding yourself back in that way, which is one of the reasons why Steve originally approached me. One of the questions I get asked a lot is like, why the hell do you do this? Like, why are you a confidence coach? How did you get into it? So just to give you a bit more understanding around that. So I'm going to go back quite far. So when I was 6 years old, the first time I ever got up on stage, I was at Butlins, and I'm a singer and I'm also a guitarist as well. And I didn't realise at the time there's 800 people in the audience, but there was a talent competition going on. And the guy didn't expect a 6-year-old to walk up and say, can I sing on stage? I wasn't allowed to go into it because I was too young, but he did give me sympathy and he did let me come up. So the point is that it became very clear that I was a bit of a performer. So I was always quite natural in terms of with my guitar and singing and just performing. But where this became a bit of a stumbling block for me is that this performance just carried into every area of my life. Like I lived probably the first to my late 20s, probably up to the age of about 28, I'm 39 now, living in a world of quite a lot of performance. So the way that I operated was different from my social groups with my friends, with my family, with my workmates, with my sports teams, with everything else. And I just lost who the hell I was with this constant ongoing performance. And that's because I didn't have the confidence, and I didn't realize, this is the most interesting part, that the confidence I was lacking. So I'd traveled Canada on my own, I'd been up on stage performing, I was always quite extrovert. So in my head, you can only do those things if you're confident. But what I didn't realize is that the reactions that I was having to different situations was actually really stemming down to lack of confidence, and I felt like I was just basically internally imploding. And it was a very difficult, isolated world because nobody really knew who I was, because everybody assumed I was this massive, extrovertly confident person. So my turning point was after spending about not quite actually that long, but 12 years in counselling, thinking I was just fundamentally flawed because I was so clever at doing these things, but I was still feeling like this horrible person and reacting terribly. I mean, for an example, if I ever ended up in conflict, I was so fearful of that conflict, I would have a horrendous stutter. I couldn't even string a sentence together. And as you can see, I don't have a speech impediment. But that conflict, I was just so fearful of it that I literally stutter. So I avoided it like the plague. I became a massive people pleaser. Everything just got really awkward for me. So my turning point was I found an article online. I was doing my usual research of like, why am I weird? And then just kind of came across an article that talked around authenticity, living in integrity, confidence, and the impact of what that looks like when you don't live in that way. And then it was like this guy had written about me. So long story short, this guy turned out to be a confidence coach. I didn't even think, what the hell is a confidence coach? Never even heard of it, So that was my turning point. Got involved working with him, did a very, very intensive course with him, had more impact from those few months working with him than I'd had in probably 12 years of any other like counselling or therapy stuff that I'd gone into. And that was kind of where it was my turning point to realise that other people struggle with the types of psychographic things that I was battling with. And it's so rife, like I see it all the time, every day. And then I was seeing how it impacted in people in the workplace. I was seeing it in my sports teams. I've seen it with my friends. So I was like, okay, I want to be able to help people do the same journey that I've kind of gone through over the last 12 years or so, because I'm 11 years, 12 years, whichever, I'm nearly 40. So that's my journey and why I'm here and why I kind of got to where I am at the moment. So today, what I'm going to go through is the psychology around the way that we think and the way that we start believing in our believing patterns and our self-belief patterns. Then to give some misconceptions around that of the way that we're taught in self-development, which I think is really important that we master. And then a bit of a strategy to help you get out of a situation when you are in this wobbly, not feeling too resilient situation. Just to put it into context, I can spend with my clients between 15 and 20 hours dealing with people one-to-one with this. It's going to be very hard to give you a real in-depth in the short time that I've got today, but I can give you a highlight to give you some more information, and etc. So in terms of the way we think, I'll put this into like a bit of a diagram for you. So basically, hopefully you can read my handwriting, a thing happens. So something happens, it's an experience, it's something that we see, it's something that we observe. Just basically something happens that we attach to. And then we observe that thing, which is when we absorb the data from it, we start making sense of it, we decide if it's something that we want to keep in our memory bank, because we have 50,000 thoughts a day, well up to 50,000 thoughts a day, but we don't remember 50,000 thoughts a day. So when we kind of go to the observe function, we start thinking, is this something I want to remember? It's like a filtering system. Is this something I want to keep in my memory? Is this, worth me keeping? Is this of any interest? Then we make, how can I draw this better? Okay, we then start making a conclusion about it. And this is where we start making our definition of ourselves. Like, how does it impact on us? Is this how I fit into the world? Is this how... is this a reflection of other people? Is this just is this a reflection of the world? Or is this actually just, this is me, this is how it impacts on me? And then this is when you start making rules up and it starts leading into beliefs, which I'll go into in a second. But it starts, let me think, you start making an analysis of, is this something of like, is this a long-term thing that's happened? Or is this a short-term thing that's happened? And which then obviously leads to our beliefs. Now, these two comfortably combine to cause cognitive bias. So once you've seen your conclusions, this is often what you refer to when you're in a debate with somebody. You start having an argument with somebody. You'll start drawing upon the things that you've seen, like, well, this confirms it. This becomes your power when you're having that debate kind of thing. And then this creates a belief around what that means. And you'll have a belief which varies from one situation to another. So I might have a belief that if I say to my mum, you've gained weight, she'll react in a particular way. If I say it to my dad, he won't care. So even though you've got the same process that goes around thinking, it can vary from one situation to another. And we have this at work when you're dealing with, if I need to speak to this person about their punctuality, about their performance, the way they're going to react is going to be different from this person. So it always varies, although the whole thing kind of connects together. And then this obviously defines, as you can see, I haven't left much room, but I'm going to squeeze it in here, actions. Whoop. So once you've got a belief system, this massively impacts on what you do with that belief system. So how much you show up, how much you push yourself, how far you go, how much you put yourself forward for promotion, how much you hold back if you're in conflict. If you're in a meeting, are you the first person to put your hand up because other people, I call it the green light syndrome, you wait for other people to speak first. And a lot of this actions will be determined by your beliefs. So will I be valued if I put my hand up? Are people going to believe that, etc.? And all of this starts piecing together what we call the reticular activation system. Reticular activation system, which basically a filtering system. So what you then do is grab onto information to confirm your belief. So for example, I was running a confidence group in Bristol not so long ago, and I went to the bar with another lady with me who was attending the workshop that I was managing. And we both ordered a drink. Now, fair dues, the guy behind the bar was actually quite abrupt. He was quite rude. Now, in my head, I just thought, God, this guy's had a bad day. He's probably been dumped by his girlfriend or something, or he's been told off by his boss. And I just assumed he was just a rude guy serving me. This other lady that I was stood with, the whole thing, because this thing had happened, she'd observed it. She already had a conclusion around where she sat in the world, what this meant to her. Her belief was, nobody likes me, that she came in with that preconceived belief before we got there. And as an action, she then started believing that it was further evidence. Oh, hello. Come in, it's okay, don't worry. It was further evidence of that nobody likes me, because the belief system was, nobody likes me no matter what I do, where I go, this is the belief system. So the same incident happened exactly the same between me and this other lady, but our belief system around it completely varied based on the way that our mind thought. So does anybody have any questions around that? Good, sounds quite clear. What do you think the risks are of something like that? Where do you see this going in terms of how this can be damaging for you? Because another thing to remember is that the more you believe this belief that you have, the more that you're likely to follow through with it. And the more it sticks you get stuck in this mind. So where do you see the risk with something like that? Anybody? Okay, good example. Yeah. Anything else?
Lost opportunities.
Sorry?
Lost opportunities.
Such as?
Well, if you're predicting that something might result in a certain outcome, you might think, well, I'm not going to put myself in that position.
Like a job interview,
Yeah.
and then you maybe look at the competition you make the analysis around this, therefore your belief is they've got more experience than me, the action is I don't go ahead and do it. Yeah, great example. Anybody else? Just one last more?
We may behave in the wrong way just based on your own beliefs and misinterpreted behaviour. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is where I think that self-development falls over a little bit, is because I think there's so much focus on this, and it is important to understand, and it is important to have your head around. But the problem is that there's a belief that as human beings, when we go into the unknown, it unsettles us. And what we love is certainty. And that is absolutely crucial that we understand that, because when we don't have certainty, we create our own certainty. So if we don't know what will happen if I do this thing, we then make it up in our head based on previous experiences, everything else that's happened, what's happened with other people. And then we start creating our uncertainty because we hate the unknown. And the thing where we go wrong as a human being is that we love to believe that by knowing the thing that we need to change is enough in order to change it. So we think, well, I know I need to do that, therefore I'm going to be okay. But yeah, how many people in here can relate to knowing that I shouldn't do that thing, but they've gone and done it anyway? Could be anything. It could even be like reaching out for that extra cookie when you're on a diet. It could be you're trying to quit smoking, and nobody thinks it's healthy to spark up a cigarette these days, but so many people still do. And even when nicotine is out of our system, it takes like 3 weeks, I think. I'm not like a pro smoker or anything, but I think it takes like 3 weeks nicotine to leave a system. People quit, and 6 months later they start again. So what is that driving our behaviour? Because we have so much emphasis on this. So let me give you some context around that, if I can put this over here. So I'm going to give you another diagram. Everything that I've just described in that past diagram is basically here. It's the tip of the iceberg, but it's where we get stuck. It's absolutely where we get stuck, and it's the thing that we get so locked in our heads. This becomes the driving force for everything that we believe and that we think is going on, but it's not what's actually driving us. And this is basically what is driving everything. Is some people call it our emotions, some people call it our ego, some people call it our complete subconscious. I think it's a bit of all of the above. So for example, in here you'd find fear, anger, depression, let me think, shame, sadness. And the thing with this is that these mostly are created of who we are on our belief system around most of the, how this shows up in our lives between the age of 0 and 4 years old. So it's really hard to start tapping into which one sits and where. But this becomes the fire in our belly for everything that drives the behavior. But this becomes the way that we see it. This becomes the narrator for what's going on in here. So fear could be things like, let me think. So I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Anger can come into things like perfectionism, scarcity as well. I'm too old for that. I'm too young for that. I haven't got enough of these resources in order to drive that. Depression can come through like I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy of this type of success or this type of attention. And shame and sadness go very closely together. It can be things like, if I do this thing, it will upset somebody else. If I do this thing, so-and-so will be angry at me. If I do this thing. So we have all this rule book that is driving it. And this is how it shows up from a driving our perspective of an emotional perspective, which is fueling this. So this is my fire. But this is where we get stuck. And does anybody relate to this? Because when you get stuck into for example, look at public speaking. Here I am today speaking and everything. Whereas say you're about to go up on stage, I get so many clients that say to me, I have this overwhelming anxiety when I'm going up on stage. But the things that they say to themselves are, they're going to laugh at me. Everybody's going to think I'm stupid. They're going to boo me off stage. But that's all being driven by fear. But they don't associate it with fear. They associate it as the reasons why they shouldn't do it. And when this kicks in to action, it basically, it gives you a story and then it gives you an instruction. And that's the bit we need to be very, very mindful of, because if we get too stuck in our thoughts, which is just a smaller part of this, we then get an action. So look at the examples you guys gave before, maybe not applying for a promotion because you've had, this story of fear is driving that fundamentally. I'm not going to be good enough. Look at all these other people that have more experience than me. That's the story. The action is don't apply for the job. So what happens? You play small. You start, you're pulling yourself back out of that. It's the same with anger, and anger really fuels the beliefs as well. I had even an incident recently where I found one person very, very passive aggressive. I've had ongoing issues with them, with their door slamming and just being very difficult. And yet then when something happened, it was very easy for my anger, because I've had months and months of this, to manage it in a way that actually I then realised afterwards all the thoughts that I thought were going on around something that happened, I thought that she was to blame. It turned out that was completely wrong, but I was so sure of it, because the more this kicks in, the more that becomes real. And that's why this is so, so important about driving all of this. Is this making sense to everybody? And that's why when people start getting so locked in the head, we get stuck, and that's where we get stuck. So I'll put that up here actually. Because when we get stuck up there, we don't even pay attention to here. Now, a lot of people say to me, what about your resilience? Can you come through that? How do you get more resilient? It's not about actually being thicker skinned and being tougher. It's actually being less attached to the things that you're attached to. Because you can't be rejected from something if you're not attached to it. The issue with things like anger, which goes safely into perfectionism, the problem with that is the belief that perfectionism even exists in the first place. So once you understand that most of our behavior is actually being driven by our emotions, and they are there to protect us, so every time it's triggered in a way that this is triggering, I don't feel safe right now, stories start emerging, beliefs start emerging, and then outcomes start happening, which is when people start holding themselves back. Self-doubt gets really, really prominent, and that's when people start. And also people start using it against other people, because once fear is triggered, when they see other people doing well, anger can be triggered because they feel that they're being left behind and the other person's over-exceeding them. So then they might even go into trying to sabotage the other person, which is again being driven by this, but in their head they'll be like, they're showing off, who do they think they are, look at them with all that blah, blah, blah. That's the story, and that's what they get absolutely stuck in. So when this is in full swing, so you've got a number of these going into place, it's what's driving us, but we get absolutely locked in here. In my experience, there are 5 main types of psychographic things. But actually, before we go into that, I've just remembered one part of this. I would be interested in one person's, if you're brave enough or kind enough, whichever you want to put it, somebody's an experience of where they've done something and it maybe hasn't gone according to plan, or they've wanted to do something and maybe they've made a move to do something and it hasn't worked out, or they've held back from doing something. Just any example at all. If not, I can bring one to a table from a previous talk around this. But has anybody got an example, because I can show how this comes up in real life. Anybody? Come on, Steve. Come on, you're the host here today. Everybody else is shy. There's too many. Brilliant. Then it shouldn't be hard to find one. It is, yeah. And you're blushing. I love it. No, take a sip of water. Okay, so I did a talk very similarly with another recruitment company, actually. An example that was given to me from the audience was this guy had 5 offers, and they all fell through for different reasons. So there was one counter offer, there was one guy just decided he was going to retire or something, there was somebody else, there was all a different reason, like one decided he was going to stay, there's all 5 offers fell through. So as a result, he basically started saying things like, I'm not very good at doing this anymore, everybody else is performing around me, and it triggered a whole host of different things, whereas the thing that was underlying it was anger and fear that if he did this again, he might end up losing his job because he obviously was fearful of like sustaining that. But at the time, all he could think was, I'm not good enough. My boss is going to be angry at me. Look at everybody else doing really well. And all he could think about was that. But actually, it was so much more. And the worst thing is as well, when that thought process gets into action and gets into lock, you start thinking one thing and it spirals, and then you start thinking something else and you think something else. So for example, I've had people say, well, I'm not going to apply for that job because, or I'm not going to take an action on something because I might look silly. But then if I go for it and it doesn't work, then sorry, I'll give you a specific one. My friend who's about to launch a book, she hasn't hit the go button. It's a beautiful book, she's ready to launch, but she's so scared of getting bad reviews, what people might say about it. She's holding herself back from just doing that thing. And in her head, if she hits go in that launch for this book, she's then going to get bad reviews. That will then affect her business. She'll then lose credibility. She'll then lose all her clients. Her business will go under. She'll have to go back to the corporate world, but she's been out of the corporate world for 10 years, so she'll have to start her salary down here. Then she won't be able to afford a mortgage. Then she's going to lose her home. Then it was like, oh my God, mate, like what happened? Like, oh, just launch your book, for God's sakes. But instead, this whole story just unraveled. In her head, within 2 years, she was going to be living in a box next to the M32 or something, all because she's scared of hitting go on that button. And it was the beliefs that was being driven by fear of failure, fear of looking funny to other people, fear of being judged. But fundamentally, all she could hear was in her head is like, this isn't going to work. And this story had completely unraveled about how she was going to end up without a home, kids going to hate her, husband's going to leave her, all because of just this fear of launching. And that's what we do when we get locked in this. So once that is in full swing, you've got all the ego basically protecting us, like with the fear, the anger, depression, everything like that. You've got the full swing of all the thoughts. These are the main 5 characteristics that I see coming up with psychographically anyway. One is, I'm going to do some more writing, comparing yourself to others. How many people here have compared yourself to somebody else and felt inferior to them? Pretty much everybody. Okay, another one is caring too much what others think. Again, how many people here can relate to caring too much, giving too much of a shit what other people think? You know, people come up and they'll say, what are you wearing those clothes for or whatever, and you go home and change them. Like, what the hell is that all about? I've done that years ago, particularly. And this will be in different levels. Some people don't care around how they look when they're doing a particular performance, but they will care to how stupid they might look to the partner or to their workmates or to their boss, but they don't care to the team that people report to them. So there's all different ways that we view this based down to our beliefs again. That's another one. These are huge. These hold people back massively, like hugely. Another one is perfectionism. Anybody here a perfectionist? Don't to submit something in case it's not right. Normally triggered by fear and anger again. So it's, I don't want to submit this piece of work because it isn't quite right. It's a way to stop you feeling that actually it always triggers the I'm not good enough button, because no matter what you do and what you project and what you submit as a piece of work, it's never going to be good enough because it could have always been that little bit more and always been that little bit better. So the message you get is I'm not actually good enough no matter what I do. Another one is procrastination. Anybody here procrastinate? I bloody do. So procrastination goes very, very closely in hand with perfectionism. It often is perfectionism that stops you from just taking that next action. Always, always, always underlined by fear. Fear of something, fear of failure, fear of something. All of a sudden, those IKEA cupboards that you haven't put up for 2.5 years suddenly need doing, you know, because you're just scared of doing the thing that you really need to do. And finally, the thing that comes up a lot is a high attachment to the outcome. Yeah. So basically, people often challenge me a lot on this, and I could probably do a whole hour's talk on being attached to the outcome. But this is huge because we start associating our outcomes with our worth. We start associating our outcomes with how we're seen to other people, like our titles, our income, the size of our house. Like this is This is huge in terms of our attachment to that. And then people say, well, how can I not care? How can I not care about the outcome? It's my job. Like, of course I care about how well I perform, and of course I care about what my team think of me. But let me give you an example. It's not about not caring. It's about actually the way that you show up when you're detached from the thing that you're doing actually means that you show up differently. And it's how you show up that will make the difference in your success. So ironically, when you detach from the thing that you're fearful of failing at, the presence that you project is so much more powerful than not. So let me give you an example. 2 sales guys. You've got one that is they're both in week 3. One person had an absolute stormer to the beginning of the month, maybe landed a couple of lucky deals, and they're already ahead of their target for the month. So they're really comfortable that it doesn't matter what happens now. I'm gonna smash my target. You've got the other guy who hasn't actually made anything, hasn't sold anything. He's in a state of panic because he's so attached to the outcome being, I have to hit my target, I have to do this. How do you think they're going to be on the phone or with clients, whatever, when they're both neck and neck? One person has already passed their attachment to the outcome, one is clinging to it, one's going to come across as needy, one's going to be more anxious, they're probably going to make desperation decisions, the other person's going to feel it. And the chances are, even though the person on week 3 who's already made, X amount of sales, he's still going to probably have more success for that final week because he's not attached to the thing that is actually holding him back. So although people think, well, how can you not be attached to the outcome? Actually, the attachment to the outcome is the thing that you can't always control. Like public speaking events, people get attached so intensely to what the audience think of them, but they can't control that. For all I know, you guys came in today, you've had an awful morning, you got stuck in traffic, your partner told you they want to leave you, your dog died, and your house is burnt down. I know that's extreme, but I can't control if that happened to you. Maybe none of you want to be here and you've only come because out of obligation because Steve invited you. I can't... I'm only joking, obviously, Steve. Because you're so powerful, people want to do that for you. I can't control that. I can't control if this lands well with you. But if it does, brilliant. If it doesn't, then I can't control that. I can only measure myself and my own performance, but it's the attachment to what other people think. Again, talk about public speaking. It's the attachment to what do they think of me? Is this landing well with them? Are they accepting this? Are they enjoying it? Are they learning anything from it? I've got to be perfect. I can't stutter. I can't forget my words. Procrastination. Oh my God, do I want to do this? Maybe I should stay in bed this morning with my sore throat or whatever it is. All these things start coming up. And it's all of these get into full swing, which are all in your head, which fundamentally are all led by fear and all the other things that were mentioned in the ego type of thing. So you might be thinking, well, that's lovely, Angie, but how the hell do we get out of this? And let me give you a quick synopsis of how basically I work with my clients to overcome this. Because not many people are actually very aware of what their values are. And I work to a values-based system. So what if I say values to you guys, what do you guys think of values? Anybody? What would be a value for you?
Fairness.
Yeah, okay, good.
Honesty.
Yeah. Honesty, any more?
Integrity.
So who said that? Yeah, okay, so what do you mean by integrity?
Well, it's close probably to honesty, but doing what you say you don't do.
Okay.
Could be about being authentic.
Mm-hmm. Cool. It's a great value. I'm going to put it over here and I'll come back to it because there's a reason why. So, any more? Because there's loads.
Empathy.
Yeah, good one. Okay, any more? So I can chuck in a few if you get stuck.
Accountability.
Okay. So like ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What about bravery? Yeah. Any more? What about acceptance? Yeah. I'm going to put 2 more in because the room's going a bit quiet. Kindness and caring I tend to put together as well. Now, so fundamentally around values, first and foremost, this is one of the key things that massively people misunderstand. They think about values and they go, this is how I treat other people. And yes, that is huge. That's really important. I'm not underestimating that. But first and foremost, this is how you treat yourself. And people massively misunderstand that. And the thing is as well, even if you want to be, say, patient with somebody else, it's 10 times harder to be patient with other people if you're not patient with yourself. It's 10 times harder to be 100% honest with other people if you're not honest with yourself. And it's a lot harder to be caring towards other people if you're not caring towards yourself. Now, the reason why I put integrity over here, because for me, values is like an umbrella term. And I would say integrity sits at the top of the values list, because at any moment you're out of alignment with any of those other values, you're out of integrity. You cannot be in integrity if one of these is out of alignment. It could be close to, and there's large degrees of that. You know, if you're going to do a barefaced lie, or if you're just hiding the truth, both are a form of dishonesty, especially if that truth needs to be shared. People hold a lot of information back to me, that's still a form of dishonesty. Still takes you out of integrity. So that's why I think integrity actually belongs at the very, very top here, and everything else falls underneath it. So when we're in a situation where we require resilience, when we're feeling nervous, when we're feeling anxious, when we're locked in our own minds, this is the way to break that cycle. Because a lot of people think that with like the thought process I discussed before, there's so much focus on positive mental attitude, or having willpower, or just kind of, what's the other one? Positive affirmations, that's it. And what the problem with that is that it's literally, you're trying to convince yourself of the opposite of what you're actually feeling. So you might think, I feel really fat. So you go to the mirror and go, I'm really slim. And you try and do the opposite. And it's like, oh, I feel really bad about myself. So you go to the mirror, oh yeah, I'm awesome. Or whatever it is, it's like a polar opposite style. It doesn't work, and it might only temporarily work a little bit, which is why you get the whole, I don't know if you guys can relate to being up and down and up and down. So you think, right, I'm going to be really brave. And then you step into that space. Then when you're there, you're like, oh, no, it's actually really hard. I'm going to go back again. And then, so no, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. And you've got this really positive attitude because you've said it all to yourself. And you go to the gym for about 2 weeks, 3 times a week. And then it's like, okay, next week it's like 2, then it's 1. And then you're like not going again. And this is why we go up and we go backwards, because we're constantly trying to focus it on willpower and positive affirmations. So obviously the gym doesn't really, I'm just kind of use that as a personal example. So when you're in a moment of where you're feeling really stressed or really anxious, the question to ask yourself, and you might want to write this down, is, who do I need to be right now? Because a lot of people focus on, what do I need to do right now? What do I need to get right now? Say you're in an interview, you're focused on the outcome. We talked about that before. You're focused on, what do I need to do to project into this person to get this job? That focus on that means that you're focusing your measurement system on things that are external. Whereas the way to build confidence, the way to build resilience, is to focus your measurement system on your internal values. So when you're saying, so if you are finding yourself in a situation when that's in full swing and you're comparing yourself to other people and you're saying, my God, look at his education, he's got a first class honours from Oxford, like, he's going to be way better than me. Are you being kind to yourself when you're saying that? Would you say that to your best friend? Would you say that to your partner? Would you say that to somebody that you love? When you're, what are the others? So comparing yourself to others, need to refresh my memory now. Perfectionism as well. So when you're saying, this has to be perfect, I can't submit this until it's perfect. Are you being brave because you're avoiding submitting this piece of work, even though it might not be deemed as perfect? Giving too much of a monkey's what other people think. You know, when people say that isn't good enough, or you haven't done this right, and you get really stressed about it, then when you're wrapping yourself up into, I've done this wrong, I've done it again, my God, I'm just crap at doing this. Are you being kind to yourself? Are you being loving to yourself? Are you being empathic with yourself? And are you in integrity in that moment? Because this is a way to shift the mindset of the loop when you get locked in your thoughts. This isn't about trying to provide the opposite to convince your brain of something that isn't actually real. It's about a different way. It's a shift of the way to think about it, which then impacts on the emotions that we talked about before. Yes, I am feeling scared about this thing, and that's okay. It's not about suppressing the emotion. A lot of people try and go, oh my God, I'm feeling really nervous, I need to make that go away. So I've had clients say things like, They turn up the music when they're driving. They try and drown out this fear and anxiety that's going through the head when they're driving towards a client meeting or something. They're trying to overcome it and suppress it. It's the worst thing you can do. To become more resilient is actually more about sitting with that tension. When you're stressed, when you're feeling resistance, you're feeling tension. So to give you an example of what that might look like, you're in a situation, this is like a level of resistance, okay? So you might be feeling stressed, anxious, something's happening, it's uncomfortable for you. You start feeling it and you think, oh my God, it's building up, oh my God, this is awkward, I really hate this. And it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds and it starts getting to breaking point. And this is the point that it gets interesting. You either go, do you know what, it's too much, it's too much, it's too much. And you go back down here and lo and behold, you hold yourself back. You don't go forward. Or you get this tension and then you get this breakthrough. And then you pop up to the next level of resilience. But it isn't just about doing that once and then everything's all right. You literally have to acclimatize yourself to doing something repeatedly before you end up sitting up here. And lo and behold, the whole cycle starts again. You can then perform doing things differently. I mean, how many times have you, anybody here, just with a show of hands, has done something the first time they were really nervous, and now they're just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah? That's because you've broken through this particular thing. You've broken through that layer. But then that might go into something else. The next time there'll be something else scary. And how scary that is, it can be asking somebody out. You could be asking somebody to marry you. It doesn't have to be work. It could be asking somebody for a divorce. It could be asking, for something really awkward with somebody, having a really bloody difficult conversation with people, being assertive or dealing with conflict. And it's these moments, and we've all got different levels of this tension that we can manage based on what the situation is. Some people are very good at being assertive. Some people aren't being good at being assertive, but they might be very good at singing and they can get up on stage and sing, for example. So we've all got these different levels for different things in our world. And the worst thing we can do is try and suppress the emotion, because it's the emotion that is driving it. So first of all, your values will help you make sure that you are in integrity with the way you're speaking to yourself. It'll check in with, oh my God, I'm doing that thing again when I'm really cruel to me. It will make you behave in a way of like, I need to be brave right now, rather than fearing away from the thing that it is that you're scared of. But similarly, understanding this is huge, because it's not about actually running and pushing away the fear that you're feeling. It's actually sitting with it and letting it settle into you before you just go and do follow your values in order to help you make that next step. Now, this doesn't mean it's easy. And like I said, there's a lot more depth I can go into on this. I'm skimming it high level just to give explanation, because I can spend 20 hours with the one-to-one. But this is a way to just shift away from the thoughts that are stopping you from taking the action, driven by the emotion, and understanding that values is the thing that was, who do I need to be right now to be in integrity, to take that move? And understanding the resistance you're feeling is driven by your emotions and tension. And actually by doing the thing, you'll go into a new level of tension, resilience, kind of a good way to put it. And this goes on forever, right? Self-development never stops. So what people don't realize, take a millionaire who's an entrepreneur. They've had to go through so much stuff in order to be so rich. It isn't that they're just good at web development or they're just good at whatever it is that they do. They've had to go through writing a book and it flopping. They've had to go through public speaking gigs that have just been awful for them. They've had to go through trolling on the internet. Like, you see these famous people, the amount of trolls that they get saying you're awful. And most of us would be like, oh my God, it's too much. And we can handle a bit of trolling maybe, but not to the extreme. But if you jump from there to there, you're going to be falling in straight into your panic zone. And this is another way, I've not really left much room here. So this is your comfort zone here. You've got a lovely little stretch zone here, just on the outside of that. And this is your panic zone. And if you go into your panic zone, it's too much. So that's like jumping from there to there. And that's why by default, you'd naturally go straight back to your comfort zone again, because that's where you feel safe and you're not having to deal with all those emotions that make you feel unsafe, like the fear, for example. So these, like the stretch zone, is a lovely, basically, mini version of, she did say she had to leave, a mini version of here into the tension. And as you carry on doing this, it just grows, and it grows, and it grows. And then that's why you become more and more bold, more and more brave, more and more able to deal with difficult situations. So, is that making sense to everybody? Any questions on that? Any insights? Yes?
I was just wondering, when do you get to a point where it's just about capability or intelligence or those sorts of things? So if you take the sales example,
Yeah.
so within a sales environment, we get taught that it's around if you're not doing one, it's about doing the basics right. and going back to that, and that will kind of get you back on track
Yeah.
again. So how much of it is around just sort of capability and intelligence as opposed to values and emotion?
Yeah, great question. So the point is that you have a lot of these training companies that do come in and they teach you the how to. So you, like, take a sales company, they'll come in and say, right, if you say this at the beginning of the call, that they'll be bought in with this, and if they give you this objection, this is how you deal with it. The how to is huge, because if you haven't got the how to, you're not going to be able to do it. I agree with you. But if it was all about the how to, everybody would go in and have the same ability to walk out and know how to do it, and everybody at the same level. But in reality, that isn't the case. Like, people are some more able at sales than others, and they've all been given the how to. So how to is important, but if you start feeling, this isn't about if you're able to do it, this is about when you're feeling the resistance to do it. So when you're locked in, oh my God, I'm on week 3 and I'm still having a blank, like, what's wrong with me? You start doubting your ability, you start comparing yourself to the other people in your office that are doing really well in the sales. That's when this is useful. So the how to obviously serves you well to be good at your job. You know, there's no point putting a spinal cord or somebody like, I don't know, a salesperson into doing spinal cord surgery. That isn't necessarily going to help you. The how to is huge, but when you sense the resilience and the restriction and the self-doubt kicking in, this. So like the first diagram I gave was your thoughts. The next diagram I gave was your emotions. This is a strategy. This helps to realign you when you go wandering off track. And it's, to stress, it's really normal. Like, we're human, we're here to protect ourselves. You know, so that's why it's not normal to do the things that are triggering the self-protection mode, which is when we're saying the things that stop us from doing the action that we need to take. Does that answer your question at all? Yeah.
I don't get the connection between anger and perfectionism. How does anger fuel perfectionism?
Because you're basically angry that you're not doing it.
Not doing it right, or just not doing it
No, well, it's almost a way. Perfectionism is used as a tool when anger is present, because it's a way to never be good enough, never quite get it right, never quite be the way. And it's frustrating, right? When you want to do something and you keep trying and you're not getting it right. In your head, you're convinced you're not getting it right. It could be bloody brilliant. But we don't feel it is. And when we're in that perfectionism mode, if we allow it to travel, I mean, it might be that you want it to be perfect and you accept that it isn't, and then you pass it on. But if you get stuck there and you're like, this isn't good enough, I'm this, I'm that, I'm losing my touch, I'm too old for this, or whatever, all these stupid things that start coming into our mind, that triggers anger. Okay. And we often use perfectionism as a way, it's actually anger unconsciously that is driving the perfectionism behavior. So we get locked in the perfectionism, but the emotion is what's driving it. Any other questions? I love questions. Go on. Love it. Come on. Yeah, go.
The term resilience, what I'm finding certainly in the last couple of years, seems to be a trendy word to use. And I work in talent learning and development, so trying to understand how we, in a law firm, so trying to translate how we use language, explain what we mean by resilience, and train people to be more resilient. But it just strikes me, Andrew, looking at your slide on values, that isn't being more resilient about being clear on what your values are, firstly, and then making sure that maybe when you're making decisions about how you behave or how you show up, that you're sort of thinking about the values that you want to have as deeply entrenched in the way that you are.
Exactly.
And use that as almost a handrail to guide how you behave.
Perfect.
And is resilience really about being clear on what your values are and just living by them? Or is it something else?
It's a way to control it it's a way to help. I can't say it's 100% control proof, because it depends on the level of resilience you're feeling and how unresilient you're feeling. But it's a way to, with what you gave before in terms of who I want to be, is absolutely perfect in terms of controlling those moments. And it isn't about, if you, in line with your values, you'll never feel wobbly or you'll never have a wobble. It's actually when you have a wobble, this is the way to help you dig yourself out of that. Because a lot of people don't pay attention to this and they drop the values because they're so locked in, oh my God, I'm not good enough. Oh my God, look how good everybody else is. Oh my God, look how many placements they're making, or how many court cases they've won, or whatever it is that happens in your industry. And that becomes where they get locked. This pulls you out of that. So one of the key things on this is that it's very easy to sit at home watching EastEnders in a very calm state of mind and have all these plans of how you're going to be the next day. The key thing on this is actually implementing this when you're in the resilience, when you're in the tension. It's when you're in it that will make the difference, because how many times you've gone, right, tomorrow I'm going to do this, and it feels so easy to think about doing the thing the next day because you're not feeling any tension at that moment. You're feeling quite relaxed. You sat there maybe with your partner or your dog and you're eating chocolate and you're watching telly and everything. Yeah, tomorrow's going to be brilliant. Then you're in it and it's like, oh my God, I feel so different. Then that's the key point of you utilising this. It's when you're in it, not just when you're thinking about it, because when you're thinking about it, you're still trapped in the cognitive state. It's actually when you're in it that this will be more powerful for you. Because if you are feeling that and you are saying those things, you're out of this because you're not in integrity. And you can only be integrity if you're being kind to yourself, if you're being brave, if you are accepting the situation that you're in, if you are being honest. Because just to give you a bit more context around honest, I could talk about honesty all day, I love it. But so many people think they are honest. But actually, if you've got a spectrum of honesty, you've got dishonesty that goes from barefaced lying to intentionally holding information, like you're working with somebody, it's like the motive behind it is to be a bit difficult, so people might have information but they don't barefaced lie, but they don't proactively share it because they're being difficult or whatever. That's still a form of dishonesty. Then you've got another scale of honesty where actually you want to share it but you're too scared because you think you might get in trouble, you don't know what's going to happen, so it's actually done from a place of fear rather than like malice or whatever the word might be. And then you go into honesty. The first level of honesty is actually judgment, and that's where most people sit when it comes to things like being assertive and judgment of other people and judgment of ourselves. And that's where most people think, well, it is honest if I say this thing, but actually it's coming from a place of judgment. The next stage of honesty would be highlighting the truth of what's actually physically just happened. And then the next stage of honesty would be, this has just happened and this is the impact on me and this is how I interpret that. This is my truth and my honesty, as opposed to, I'll give you an example. I know a guy who does sports classes, and he found one guy a bit not really tuned in to his sessions and everything else. And he ended up confronting him and said, you're not listening. You're not paying attention. You don't want to be here. Like, why do you even bother being here if you're just going to like not really try? You're constantly looking at your watch. You're not paying attention. That's judgment. That's not honesty. But in his head, he was convinced that was honesty because he was like, well, he was looking at his watch and he didn't want to be there. I was like, no, you believe he didn't want to be there because he was looking at his watch. Turned out on the day that he confronted him is that it was a spell where his daughter was going through A-level exams, and actually his watch checking was more reflective, like, is she out of her exam yet? And he was worried about his daughter. But his belief system was, if you look at your watch, you're not engaged, you don't want to be there. Therefore, that's a judgment. And this is why I can go into so much depth on values. It isn't just as simple as what you see here, but once you've got a really good handle of what these values look like to live by, as opposed to just being a lovely buzzword, that's when you can reach yourself in integrity. So that's when this becomes your strategic approach, if that makes sense. Am I being honest right now just because he's looked at his watch? Is it really that he doesn't want to be there, or is that my judgment that he doesn't want to be there? And the truth of it would be, if I take 2 steps up on the honesty scale, would be, I've just noticed you're looking at your watch. I interpret that as that you don't want to be there. Am I right? That's honest. You have just looked at your watch, you don't want to be there, or you don't want to be here, why do you even bother, is judgmental. And this is why this is so important. And once you can really get a handle on what your values look like, it takes you away strategically from being locked mentally into the thought processes that basically hold us back. Okay, next question, please.
Can I just ask a question on those values?
Sure.
So are those ones, because obviously you ask people around the room as well, are those the ones that you say, well, that's a complete sort of list in terms of the ones that you would capture? Or are there any others?
There's loads. There's like, I don't know exactly how many there are. And sometimes there's different beliefs of what a value is. So some people say to me, money is a value because they value it. And I would argue money isn't a value because you can have millions of pounds and be out of integrity, and you can have no money and still live in integrity. So this is about who you are. These are the ones that I find come up the most. To me, these are like a short version of a longer list, but you could have more in there. Definitely like loyalty. I'm trying to think of others. Trust, yeah, absolutely. Trust is huge. And that goes very closely with honesty as well. But there's others that other mention. Now, what you'll find is that you'll have 1 or 2. See, one of my huge values is freedom. And that isn't that important for other people. But for me, that was my driving force to giving up the corporate world and setting my own business up, just because I couldn't bear the same journey every day, the same sat with the same people in the same traffic every day, sit in the same office with the same people doing the same job. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great if that works for you. Did it for 15 years. Personally, I found it going crazy because my value was freedom. So that was what drove me to then make a decision to change that, because now I work on my own terms and my own times. But you will have 2 or 3 values that will be your priority. And it doesn't mean that the others aren't important, but there'll be ones that really you default to by nature. Like honesty is huge to me. Like if anybody lies to me, I really find it hard to like kind of ever really fully trust them again, because for me it's just so important. Freedom is huge. Honesty is huge to me, being assertive is huge to me. But similarly, kind and caring are important to me too. But if somebody was disrespectful towards me and I wanted to confront them, I'd still do that. But if the next time I saw them was at their mother's funeral, I probably wouldn't, because the value of kindness and caring would, in that moment, trump how you actually choose to operate in that moment. So this becomes all about living in the present. Because when you're panicking about other things, if you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're feeling anxiety, you're living in the future. This brings you back into a very, very present state of mind. And that's why this is so important, because everything else that you're panicking about is normally either already happened, panic about what's already happened in the past, because you've got evidence in your belief system and all the chain of events, or you're worried about what's going to happen. This is just, like even 10 seconds ago is in the past, and even 10 seconds in the future is in the future. This is absolutely present. So, yeah, I think it's a good question, because you flip it around based on what it is, and then you understanding your own values and what drives you, that becomes who you are. And anytime I work with anybody that is battling with the main 5 psychographic things that I described before, like the comparing yourself to others, caring too much what other people think, 9 times out of the 10, they're out of integrity. Like if you look at the values, they're out of alignment. So once I can realign somebody in that way, you start finding a difference in the way that they choose to behave. And this then becomes a measurement system to be assertive. It becomes a measurement system to how do I deal with conflict. It becomes a measurement system to this really difficult situation. I simply don't know what to do. This will give you your answer. Like when you just get stuck, like, I don't know, this is so complicated, I don't know what to do and how to deal with this. If I do that, that's going to upset him. If I do it, it's going to be rude. If I do this way, I'm going to be submissive. What do I do? Like, it's actually this that realigns you to help you make this decision making at its best as well. So it isn't just about under resilience. This can be used as who you become, and it helps you be assertive and it helps you do everything else. It's really powerful. Any other questions? Yeah, again, cool.
A lot of, most of us, I would imagine, work in organisations in different sectors. And a lot of firms or organisations have values,
Sure.
firm values. So I'm curious as to how do you from a professional perspective rather than from a personal perspective. Because I can certainly understand how I could apply this in my own personal life. But how can we apply some of these thoughts in the context of organisational life, where maybe you've got a set of values, like company values, that people working in that organisation need to
adhere to.
And I guess either choose to adhere to or not.
Those could conflict with each other as well.
Can you give, I was going to say, can you give an example though? How they conflict?
One example, it's not necessarily a firm value, but if you're a partner in a law firm, then to a certain degree you are, during the week, married to an organisation. And there is an expectation as to how hard you need to work and where you need to be at any point in time. So I was recently coaching a partner who, when we were talking about values, because we did have this conversation, and he said, one of the most important values to me is family.
Sure.
My family are the most important thing in my life.
Yeah.
And I said to him, open up your calendar, your Outlook calendar, and let's see where you are in the next 4 weeks. And I think he was away from home for 3.5 weeks max for travelling in Asia or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we had, then it was a period of, I can see the misalignment between what I'm saying and how I'm behaving.
Yeah.
Now he would argue that he's doing that so that he can send his kids to private school and give his family the life that they've become accustomed to. But I think it was a jolt for him as to, am I really truly living by my values?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it can lead to some quite big decision making in terms of how they live the remaining 15 years of their professional life.
Yeah.
Because this person's in their mid to late 40s. So it's not that wasn't a firm value, but I think there's an underlying value that at that level
Yeah.
There's an expectation that you do give a lot to an organisation.
Absolutely.
But then the question is at what cost?
Absolutely. And what that cost looks like comes down to your personal values. So for some people, family is huge, therefore the cost to him would be bigger than somebody that doesn't have a family. So that's the whole point around this, because somebody that didn't have a family and wasn't driven by family, and they did feel that they were still getting the lifestyle that they wanted and felt happy with, then they might not feel that they've been out of integrity. To somebody that is family orientated and they're away for 3.5 weeks out of 4, that's going to cause huge stress. And that's when people start, feeling, that's when it can trigger things like depression, and it can trigger things like anxiety and anger, because there's this frustration of not being who you want to be. And I mentioned at the very beginning that when I was going through this journey of a very, very unconfident place to, I'm still not perfect, but I'm a lot more confident now, and I'm fairly comfortable with who I am now. But I changed who I was based on different environments just to fit in, because I was so desperate to please and be liked by everybody. That's an example of that. He's doing it to be liked, he's doing it to please, he's doing it to please other people. I would say because if his power and his main value is family, that's going to cause, he's out of integrity a little bit there.
Well, I think where we got to was that when we had a further conversation about it, yes, family is important to him, but actually, is it more important to him than power and achievement and that sense of having a badge?
Mm-hmm. But is having a badge about what other people think? How they're viewed in the world? If he had that badge and nobody knew him from Adam and nobody knew his situation, would that be as powerful? So then is that actually about his internal self-worth, or is his measurement of self-worth being measured on external validation? Which is, again, that's not value-based. If you're measuring how well you look to other people because of your title, because of your income, because of your big car, because of your massive watch, it's of no surprise to me that 80% of my clients are C-suite people and directors and leadership level. I don't go into the market saying I specialise in C-suite, but I've opened the door since opening my business, and I've had a floodgate of those types of people, because I think there's so much pressure. Those people, they've had this story sold to us from such a young age of, if I do this, this will bring me happiness. Like if I grow up, go to school, get an education, go to uni, meet somebody, get married, have 2 kids, get a big house, get a good job, get loads of money. We have our lives planned out for us moving forward, and we have this so often. And people get there and they're like, I've got it all. I've got the kids, I've got the husband, got the wife, got the massive house, got the big income. And I feel like shit. Like I get that a lot. Like I get these people getting really like, oh, I don't feel good. And it's because they're not out of integrity for who they are, not what they need to do or what they need to get. I've seen people, I would never advise, that isn't my nature of coaching, I don't advise what people do, but I have seen people who are very, very wealthy, like high 6 figures, salaries, big house and everything, and give it the job to be like chefs, self-employed chefs, or give it the job to be, just going to go travelling for a year because I just want to find myself. I don't even know who the hell I am. I've just worked so hard, 80, 90 hours a week to follow this path, and they get there and they're not happy. And it's once they find their values, that's when it starts falling into place for them. Now, I understand there are some compromises sometimes. It isn't all about all or nothing, but if you're too far away from who you are, that's when you start feeling upset and unhappy and everything else. And when there's a conflict between the value of a business and a personal value, yes, that's going to cause huge tension, absolutely. And it's always the company, people that I meet and work with, when they say, I just love my company, I love what they stand for, I love like the flexibility they give me, the kindness, what they do for charity, like all this other stuff that starts resonating with them. And a lot of the other companies are just like, work. They're often, they look great and successful on paper, and I'm not saying they're unsuccessful, but you often find a lot of unhappiness. I'm not saying that's categorically the case at all, please don't get the wrong message, but it's not unusual for me to come across those people, and actually they don't have a massive connection with the children. When was the last time they sat down with a partner and just said, you're the best thing that ever happened to me? Like, what type of connection are they having in life? Because that's where values start really showing up, not just look at my massive salary and title, which is where a lot of us are led to believe that's what will bring us the happiness. Cool. I'm conscious of the time because I had till 9:45, and I know some people need to get back. So guys, it's been wonderful. If anybody wants to go in any more further details around this, I can be reached on info at my name, so info.
Actually, I'll send these details around.
Okay, I'm going to write it anyway. genuine.com. There we go, that's com. There you go. I'm happy to answer any further questions. If any of you guys are actually curious about genuine coaching, like I'm happy to give first 5 people, that if any of you are, but if you are, please message me and I'm happy to do I'll give you a free, full-blown coaching session just to see the difference of that versus maybe anything else that you'd be involved with as well. I do run workshops on assertiveness and leadership too, and it's often values-based. If you're interested in that, just look me up. But other than that, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, guys.